Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Danny Smith, Executive Vice President and co-owner of Color ID. Welcome to Color ID's Campus Forum series, continuing the conversation. Today's session is titled Making and Managing Campus Credentials, and this is the third in a series of 5 live sessions that will run each Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Each session generally lasts about 60 minutes and will repeat once again in the third forum series at future dates to provide attendee flexibility. Please feel free to invite colleagues from your institution or your company or anyone you know across the identity industry that would benefit from participating in the Campus Forum series. A registration link is located on our website at colorid.com. There's a drop-down under webinars. At the end of today's session, relevant to the institutional attendees, there'll be a Menti poll to learn more about the common challenges that you're now experiencing. It's simple to do. You just open a browser on your PC or mobile, go to menti.com, and that's MENTI.com, and then you'll type in a 6-digit code, and we'll give you the code and explain more to that later on in the presentation. You know, it's really nice to develop such meaningful relationships over the past 20 years, and we're really incredibly grateful that we can all come together and stay connected. Once again, we got a really large group of identity industry attendees joining us today from literally all over the world. We have folks from Europe, South America, New Zealand, Canada, United States. And so as we say, whoever you are and wherever you may be, we welcome you. And we hope that you find the investment of your time a great value, and we encourage you to be really interactive in these sessions. Leading today's technical discussion will be David Stallsmith, Director of Product Management for Color ID. David brings a wealth of technical information from over 14 years of working with advanced identity solutions. Many of you know and have worked with David over the years as he works closely with manufacturers, vendors, and end users to promote the understanding of the complicated products and services that comprise our identification industry. He's contributed to the decision-making process at many universities, healthcare facilities, and government agencies as they have considered acquiring contactless, smart card, mobile ID, and biometric systems. And since 2006, David has presented annually at the NACU conference and has also presented at NACUS's annual and leadership conferences, the European and Canadian Campus Card Users Conferences, and full-day identity summits hosted by prominent universities throughout North America. Now, joining David on today's session as moderator is Mark Deegan, Color ID's Corporate Marketing Manager. And in addition to managing Color ID's marketing department for the past 16 years, Mark also juggles the duties of account representative for some of our most strategic partners, both customer and corporate. And he's also the project manager for Color ID's banking-related customers. Mark and David's technical knowledge concerning identity solutions is a testament to their commitment to our industry and a great example of the value differential that Color ID employees bring to our customer and our corporate partner relationships. Now, just a few housekeeping items, we'll get started. We're really encouraging these sessions to be interactive as possible, so please, everyone, if you would, utilize the question box to submit questions. And all questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation during the Q&A period. And in addition to asking questions, there'll also be live polls throughout the presentation. So be sure to participate in those and be as prompt as possible. Please note, Color ID's higher education team is listening in on today's session, and they want you to know that they're here for any questions or any follow-up discussions that you may have. Just call or shoot your account manager an email. Also, a reminder that everyone that completes the 5-session form will receive a certificate of completion and also a Color ID swag bag filled with some really cool stuff. Color ID can confirm everyone's attendance, so you don't have to do anything regarding to that. However, each session does require a separate registration, so please make sure you've registered for all the future sessions. Hey, thanks again, everyone, for the privilege of your time and keeping us connected. Now I'm going to turn this over to David and Mark to get started. David?
Thanks, Danny, and hello, everyone. We appreciate your joining us today. This one, Making and Managing Campus Credentials. Again, it overlaps some of the other topics in this series, but we focus on an area, and in this case, we want to differentiate between making and managing, and point out that you really would consider making a credential or an identity representation of some sort is part of the management process. And so we're going to start big and go small. Identity management, what is it? And I'm going to tell a story, one in particular. It's pretty involved, that will explain how this came into the caller ID topics of conversation. Then we'll talk about ID software, which in the university market in North America is going to have to include a discussion of ID Works and then everything else. And then we're going to talk about new web-based software. So going ahead, identity management is, like I said, the broad topic of managing identities, credentials representing identities. And one of the things that we've noticed in not just at higher ed, but many markets, is that there's a lot of deferred maintenance in identity management. It's people have been doing what they can with what they have to manage identities and get stuff done. But it seems like it's sort of time, as with many other things going on around us these days, for a reevaluation and perhaps a reset. And maybe in the not too distant future, we'll be able to address what we see as deferred maintenance. So from there, we go to our first poll.
Thanks, David. All right, guys. I'm going to open up our first poll today. And if you could just interact with this as quickly as you can, that'd be awesome. Choose one of these. What is your primary system for managing credentials? Once everybody has completed voting, I will go over these with you guys. And just to touch on any questions that you might have, please submit those through the GoToWebinar portal, and I will answer them either privately or we'll hold on to them at the end of the presentation. Okay, we are good to go there. I'm going to share these and go over them with us. So 79% of you utilize a one-card system. That would be the likes of Transact, Seaboard, Atrium, TouchNet. 11% utilize ID software itself, like ID Works. And then we have a tie at 5% of PACS, as well as a house-built identity management system. So overwhelmingly, one-card systems are being used for this group. All right, Dave, there you go, bud.
Thanks, Mark. All right. Yeah, so that sort of reflects what we have experienced, obviously, working with universities in North America. We're very aware of the importance of the one-card systems on campus, providing one-card issuance and management. No question, it's important. In other markets, there have been attempts where there were not, you get outside of higher ed, and there are lots of other markets where credentials are issued to do various things, mostly to open doors, actually. You don't find within an institution things like payments for vending and payments for meals the way that you do in higher ed. In healthcare, for example, you might find a lot of management of this employee ID, making it possible to buy a meal in the cafeteria with your employee ID, and maybe it hits your payroll deduction plan. There are elements of that throughout, but nowhere is it so fully employed as it is in higher ed, because obviously people are living on your campuses, and living requires everything, food, housing, and everything else relative, and so you give them a card with which they can do all that. In the other markets, in 2006, I remember I went to a conference, a smart card conference, and Bill Gates was there, and he was in a conversation on stage, and he said, well, we think smart cards are the key to the future. They're going to be, we're going to use them to manage identities. They're going to provide security. In a way, he's still telling that same story. He's back in the news, which made me think of bringing him up at this point. But at that time, they kind of saw the card itself as providing all the identity management you needed. What you needed would be on the card. It would be securely encrypted and stored on that card. It could be accessed by various systems. It didn't get much farther, within a few years after that, it didn't get much farther than that than the federal government. The federal government went all in on smart cards, and they can do a lot of things with those smart cards, but it's so expensive and so involved that it did not really make it out of the federal government and their contractors in any great measure. We saw in the financial markets that a smart card, the EMV chip, contact chip, actually did make it onto credit and debit cards. It had been there in other countries for years. That was primarily, though, just to provide security for the ID number that's stored on the card. It wasn't that the card was doing any identity management. It was just storing a number. So we had heard, 10, 15 years ago, that there was an interest in identity management. Various segments of the markets were thinking about it and looking for ways to do that. But it didn't really come into our attention at Color ID until one of our customers came to us late 2012, early 2013, and we'd worked with them for years, printers, cards, all the ID stuff, and they said, we have hired a consultant, and so would you please talk to our consultant and teach them what you know about card management so that we can use them to write an RFP for identity management. We thought, well, that's kind of backwards, but being a good customer and wanting to further the higher ed market, we said, sure, we can do that. So we worked with the consultant, we worked with the university, presented a lot of different options to them, and then they went to RFP for an identity management system. And it was a really big spreadsheet full of requirements. We need to be able to capture ID numbers. We need reporting. We need to be able to look up personal attributes for all these different people in our database. Birth date was especially important. They weren't going to print the birth date on the card, but they wanted to be able to look it up. And they were using IDWorks. And IDWorks, you know what IDWorks does. You know what it doesn't do, because almost everybody on this call, I'm sure, has worked with IDWorks at one point or another, if not your whole identity life. So it didn't do everything they needed, and they wanted something more. And they said, well, we just want you to present other ID software options. So we made a proposal. We presented some other ID software options that offered some more capabilities, but they're ID software. They're made to make cards. They aren't able to do all the things that this school wanted. And so they ended up, after, 6 to 12 month period, hiring a one card system provider to effectively use the one card system as a basis for building an identity management platform for this school. And they paid them quite a lot of money for this. It was very custom work. It took a long time, and they got sort of what they wanted, and it worked pretty well. Interestingly, they already had another competitive one card system on campus handling their meal plans. So, they went shopping. Nobody else at that time had exactly what they were looking for, with the ability to connect the systems and all that stuff. And so they ended up hiring this company to do that, which still kept IDWorks for ID production. So they didn't get rid of IDWorks. They just put a whole wrapper around that enabled them to get the other features of identity management that they wanted. And they were pretty cool with that for about 5 years. And then about 2018, they contacted us again, and they said, we want to see what else is out there. I said, okay. So we pulled together every vendor that we could find that offered some kind of identity management. Obviously, they were familiar with the one card system providers. So, we brought in all different other sorts of other products. And over a couple month period, did quite a number of presentations, either over the phone or in person. And at the end of it, they said, and then they spent another year and a half considering what to do based on what they had seen. And they ended up re-upping with their original identity manager provider, which is a one card system provider. So at that point, I guess, the devil they knew was better than the devil they didn't know. Not to cast aspersions on that system, but just, they were, is there anything better? And the answer for them was, no, this is what we need. They did add some features and improvements to it along the way, and then, resolve some other things. But it was just an interesting story to us, because it was we encountered it and had a conversation with them over a long period of time in great detail about identity management. And we have begun to hear that story from a lot of other schools. And so at Color ID, we've begun to work with a number of different vendors who provide what I'm at this point referring to very generically as an identity management layer. And in this diagram, there is, kind of a cloudy blue area there in the middle. And that is this layer which could manage identities. Any one of a number of different applications and databases could sit there. It takes data from the student information system or the identity and access management, or maybe half a dozen different systems. And it processes the identities. It manages them from inception to revocation. It handles issuance of whatever type of credential is necessary. It can manage people logging into the system and then handling self-service features. But what is sort of different about this approach, and for us, it's not that it's completely conceptual, but it is still in formation as products are being developed, is all these functions, applications along the bottom of this diagram are now consumers of identity data. And so it gives you a way of managing identity separate from the way that the identities are actually used. And so this sets free the identity management system itself from all the other constraints of, for example, the way one-card systems get pulled in every direction to connect to everything and yet still provide their core features. So it's just a different approach. We'll see how it plays out, but it addresses this problem, and that's what we call the identity lifecycle and how to manage that. And it starts at enrollment or hiring or contracting, right up there at the top. It moves through. Now you got to authorize those people or vet them. Are they who they say they are? You issue them campus ID cards or mobile tokens. Maybe you have check-in kiosks or mobile ways to interface with the system in a self-service manner. You provision the tokens, the cards, the mobile credentials. Then you have audit and compliance. You're able to make sure everything is done in the way that it should be done, and then you can produce reports to say that yes, it was done properly, and you can even do forensics if you need through that reporting, and it follows that identity all the way through its life cycle till somebody leaves the school or is terminated or checks out, whatever it is, whether they're permanent or visitors. They all have some identity within your system, and it can be managed, it can be tracked, it can be controlled. If there are changes, you can make those. Now, as I'm describing this process, it's very clear that this is way beyond what IDWorks and other ID software can handle. They can print and encode cards, but that's only one piece of identity management. So, of course, when we mention identity management as an application or a service, everybody we mention it to, almost one of their first questions is it integrated with our one card system? And that's a really good question, because they know that if they're considering some kind of auxiliary system, especially one like this, it would be so connected to everything else on campus that they have experience with their one card system providers. And if something's not well integrated or supported by that one card system, they're going to be in for a long haul of time, money, and maybe pain in trying to get things integrated or connected, get information, get support. It just can be very difficult. I mean, there may be SDK development involved. Maybe the one card system offers scripts and triggers in order to make this connection. These are all, I know everybody's familiar with these processes I'm describing, and so it's very important to be able to answer this in a way that makes sense. But I think in the approach that we're looking at, where rather than the one card system consuming or absorbing the identity management, it instead is the consumer of identity management. So now the identity management system is merely an input to the OneCard system rather than requiring its life's blood from the OneCard system itself. So the nice thing that this gives you is you can take a best of breed approach if you want. There are some solutions that are really broad and contain many applications within the solution. There are others that are very specific. So some new robust identity management products are available. HID Safe has been out for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. It is very strong in the corporate market, and it supports access control systems particularly well. So if you have several access control systems, HID Safe is something you might want to look at as a product that could connect your ID credentials to those access control systems. A new product called Unifya, a service that actually is very broad in its offering and the way that it offers management capabilities. Card Exchange Cloud Suite is a very new product based on the Card Exchange, well, not really based on the Card Exchange software at all, but offered as a new product from the people that have made the Card Exchange desktop software. If you want to move and manipulate data across many systems and you don't need a lot of fancy interfaces, Swift Data does a very good job of this, and it has connections to a lot of different systems: access control, campus databases, residential management systems. A lot of things Swift Data can connect to, and it is a managed service that's usually hosted on-prem. So you have the best of both. It's managed, you don't have to maintain it, but it's on your premises, so you don't have that network latency. It's right there. And if it has to connect to access control systems, they're on-prem almost always. And so this will be right there, shoulder to shoulder to work with them. Photo upload products are very slim application within identity management. They just capture photos and they upload them, and they give you management and administrative tools to deal with those photos. Very important part of the process, but it's not a broad part of identity management. And then real-time reporting, if you're in the best of breed approach, there are schools like University of Georgia that just waxes eloquent about how much they love Click, and that they drag data into their Click instance from every system on campus, and they use it for everything from attendance to accounting. And so they are using an external third-party tool that's very robust and pretty easy to manage, and has an interface that the end user can actually use and you can configure. You don't have to be an IT graduate necessarily to be able to work with some of these systems. They are designed, they're user-friendly, and they're designed to be configurable by the people who actually use them, which is kind of important. Speaking of IT, if we're talking about identity management, if you had anybody that was more familiar with the IT world than with cards and physical access, right away they would be thinking about IAM, Identity and Access Management. This is a very mature and significant part of their toolkit in IT. They use products from Microsoft like Lifecycle Manager, Forefront, Identity Manager. Their SailPoint is another newer product that's gaining a lot of traction in all the markets for identity and access management. But what these products do is they manage digital identities. They almost don't seem to understand what a physical identity is, what a person is. It can manage all kinds of stuff across a variety of machines and operating systems, and the way data is stored and who gets access to that data and who gets access to those machines. It's very complex, and it is granular in the way it can be controlled, but it comes all the way out to the person and it just stops there. It's not really bound to the physical person in most cases the way something like an ID credential is. And so there's a line there. And I've even heard this just recently in a conversation with a school. We were installing a cloud-based service, and there were some IT people on the line who were not familiar with the service. They knew they were going to be on this call. They hadn't had time to even ask the question, what does this service do? So they show up on the call, and it wasn't like they are trying to be unhelpful, but I think their natural disdain for anything physical just kept them from knowing even how to participate in the conversation. You know, we're talking about a photo in this case and how it's going to be handled, managed, uploaded, whatever. And the IT people they just almost couldn't even begin to understand what is this photo, because it's you know, in a card office, you take a photo, you look at the person, you look at the photo you took, they line up, or they bring in an ID, a driver license, you look at that, yeah, it's the right photo, it looks like a real light. I mean, real people, hands, eyes, you know, all the sensibilities of the human being are assessing the reality of the situation in front of you. Is this a real person? Is this the ID that should go with that person? To the IT person who lives in the world of zeros and ones, these are, to them, these are more like abstract concepts. So this is the break between IT and how they manage their identities and all that they have to do there and protect their resources against the incursion of the whole rest of the world. And it is no small feat. It is a big deal. But by the time you get to physical identities, you have an entirely different problem. Now, at University of Nebraska, they use SailPoint, and that is represented by the identity management blue oval in the upper left of the diagram here. But they use Grouper to connect all their physical stuff. So Grouper is an Internet 2 service that they came across, and they have built a very robust solution there with Grouper to put people into the right physical access group. So they get, you know, when you get your card, Grouper does all the math in the background and to make sure that the doors you need in the academic buildings are open when you need to be there, your housing doors, anywhere you need access physically with your card, Grouper is going to manage that in the background and make sure data gets from one place to another. It is not a particularly user-friendly interface unless you're an IT person. So this is not something designed for the card office, for example, to be able to use every day to set people up. Here's the Swift Data product that I mentioned a moment ago. They have their Pinwheel Data Management Engine, DME, and it connects to all these different databases, Active Directory, your ERP, HR database, whatever, and then brings that data into a central database. Here they're showing all the access control systems that they interface with, but they also interface with many other systems on campus. The people who work with this product have been on campus for over 20 years, doing lots of things around connections and transactions. Another important feature of identity management is cardholder self-service. And not too many years ago, if we're talking about self-service, everybody would have immediately thought of a kiosk. And most of you would have thought, I wish we had a kiosk, because some schools had kiosks, a lot did not. Those that did not wished that they did, but they were expensive and they were kind of unreliable at times. Supported, they were not supported. Did you put a printer in there? How did the printer work? Did you log in with the username? I mean, there were a lot of things about kiosks that were kind of challenging, but if somebody's trying to get into their residence hall late at night and they've lost their card, the card office sure wished that they had a kiosk there for that person to get into their residence. So there were advantages there, but it certainly demonstrates the self-service nature. So you can request a new credential, you can request a credential for a visitor. If you lose your credential, you can get a replacement. You can request changes of role, location, change your name, change your photo. All of these, of course, subject, depending on university policy, to administrative decisions. So maybe some things were automatically granted and maybe other things required somebody to review them the next morning when they got them or whenever. But the point is, the cardholders had a way of interfacing with the service, and even the one card systems provide a lot of these features through their portals. So everybody's familiar with cardholder self-service. The other thing about managing identity is managing a variety of credentials, creating them and then following them through their life cycle, because we know now, until not too many years ago, it was just cards. And then we said, well, here comes mobile, and mobile's still coming. Hey, it's coming. Hey, mobile's going to be here. Well, it wasn't, but now it is. And so the one card systems are providing very robust management for mobile credentials if you go all in on their system. So that's the way that they've chosen to handle that, which makes sense. And then if you have biometrics on your campus, how do you manage that? Is it a totally separate system? Is it integrated in some way? So these are all different credential types that need to be managed. And I mentioned earlier, temporary identities. These are visitors to your campus, and there's usually a time frame involved. Now, you may or may not care about the time frame, but if you do care, do you have a way to manage these? And the case, right now, most schools have some kind of policies around visitors to res halls. How do you have a uniform way of monitoring that, of issuing credentials? How are you handling those? Any other visitors? Conferences, academic conferences, do you have credentials for those? Do you issue them in advance so that your guests feel welcome? They know that they're expected, and they're gonna. It's sort of like getting a notice from your hotel. Hey, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Do you have a system that can handle that? And is it uniform across your institution? Summer programs, lots of people who will be coming on your campus, not this year probably, but another summer, who won't be in your one card system necessarily. Some schools handle them that way and some don't. They're visitors. And then contractor management is kind of a big deal, because this seems to be an area where there is not a lot of concern, where there probably should be. You have contractors coming regularly on campus. They often have access control cards. And in some cases, there is only the instruction to the card office that when a contractor comes in, hand them a card and they can use it to open doors. So, no vetting, no name sometimes, or perhaps you capture a name, no expiration date for the card or for the service. So, these are things that would make sense to manage, while you're trying to figure out all the other types of security on campus, around cameras and locking doors centrally. Just having an idea who's on your campus can also be a good part of your security process. And of course, reporting and compliance. When were identities created? When were they used for transactions, and when were they revoked? At the very least, you would want that kind of reporting. And then who made those cards, and when were they made, and sometimes where were they made, which campus were they made on? So ID systems may store some of this data, but how do you pull it together? So if you have an application that's actually managing identities, it should be able to, and the ones that I mentioned earlier, it will provide these interactions with the system. So it will know all that. And there's one more feature here that has to do with the reporting, and that's the compliance. And we all are familiar now with going to websites and clicking, we have a cookie policy. I understand. Again. So, and I can go back to that site and it can tell me again, we have a cookie policy. I know. So even to get to a weather site, we have to fulfill the obligations of the European General Data Protection Regulation. So it's here. It's just here. And managing identity, knowing what credentials were created, where they were used, when they were used, you have identity data, and you are tracking that identity data. You need a way of safely complying with regulations like GDPR within your identity management system. So, and these change and they become more burdensome. And I have a feeling we're about to enter another period of some more regulation. So do you have systems that can handle this, or that are built to expand to handle what's coming? So the last thing here, this is just sort of a bit of a, I don't know, I found this as an interesting concept to me. Bruce Schneier has been around data security, and he's a cryptographer and has been an advisor to very large corporations and government agencies. He's a bit of a controversial figure because he's a little outspoken, but he's pretty bright. And he made a comment a few years ago in an article that based on all the data breaches, he considers, or at least you should think about, is data a toxic asset? We had a conversation just last week with a school, and they said, we have 9 million identities. Now, these are digital identities. These are not 9 million cardholders. So I'm sure many of them are redundant. But those identities contain personally identifiable data. And is that something that you want hanging around? Because if there's a breach, that's a problem. And do you need all that? Now, right now, I know I just hear from a lot of schools, oh, you never know when we might need it. I had a neighbor who had a you never know when you might need it idea, and he parked his car on the street because you know what his garage looked like. So just throwing it out there. And based on that, I threw out a poll question just to, for curiosity. Let's go here.
Thanks, Dave. That's a nice lead in there to your poll question here. How many active records are in your identification database? Let's see what folks come back with. Thank you for the swift reaction, guys. That's very helpful. And okay, let me share this. 71% say over 100,000 active records. 29% state 20,000 active records, and then no one has over 1 million active records. So that's a lot of identities in your databases there.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it is a lot of identities, and yet though, I mean, over 100,000 in a typical size school, maybe that's 4 or 5 years worth of students, and then of course you have faculty and staff and everybody else. So actually, these are pretty conservative. When we ran this in our first version of this session, there were a lot more 100,000 plus, and then we had a few millions plus. So good idea. I mean, 30% of you nearly have just 1 year's worth of active identity. So that's cool. Let's get out of identity management, shrink it down a little bit here, talk to a piece of identity management, which is ID software. And these names are obviously very familiar. IDWorks, Assure ID, some of you may have, and EpiSuite is still bouncing around out there. So let's go right to another poll question.
Awesome. All righty. Let's see what everyone has here. Which system or software do you see when you print cards? CBORD, Transact, IDWorks, True Credential, other? All righty. Looks like 47% list other, 27% are at IDWorks, 20% CBORD, so that would be what CardLink or Web Print Manager, I think, as a new one. 7% is Transact. No one today is utilizing True Credential, so there you go.
All right, thanks, Mark. Wow, almost half of this group is using something other than use something other, and that's interesting. I almost want to throw another poll question out there. Hey, what are you using?
Well, how about this, Dave? If anybody is willing to send in on a question or chat link, if anybody responds to that, I'll rudely interrupt you and announce it. Okay?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's good thinking, Mark.
All right.
Yeah, it is. It's supposed to be conversation. It's been pretty one-sided so far. So yeah, please send information in. So let's go forward.
Someone has, let's see here, they're coming in right now, actually, so let me go ahead and interrupt you.
Yeah.
See here, Valid, so that's an online software, right?
Yep.
Cloud-based. TouchNet ID software, someone states that they use Secure built into the Secure 9000. So there's a couple of PACS options, it looks like.
Great. All right. All right.
Fargo Connect. Someone's utilizing Fargo Connect. There you go. So cool.
Okay.
Keep it going. I'm going to
All right.
close down the poll so you can move on.
Yeah, no, that's quite a range then. So very interesting. Well, if wherever you are right now, not too many years ago, you certainly would have been in this model, legacy ID production. You have software on a computer and it is connected to one printer. And if you have 3 printers, you have software on 3 computers, and it was pretty simple. IDWorks has certainly been, even though not with this group at this point, but IDWorks certainly has been in the North America higher ed market the 800-pound gorilla. It's solid, it works. Both Seaboard and Transact have recommended it, if not directly supported it, for 20 years. So it just became sort of the de facto standard ID software. It's only in the last few years, as it has come near the end of its life, that supposedly it has been started to be replaced. Seaboard wrapped it, as Mark said, in CardLink, and Transact offered a MyFair encoding plugin. Interesting thing about IDWorks is version 6.5, the current version, was released in 2007. It has been updated to work with Windows 10, obviously, but it's still the same software and it still works. So, there's a reason it got dominant market share. Also for other reasons, AssureID, EpiSuite, RapidCard, IDMS have had significant installations in the university market. Like I said, IDWorks was sort of announced to be end of life a few years ago, but it never really happened because True Credential rolled out and then it kind of went away and then it kind of came back. So it's still available. It's still solid. It's easy to install. It does look old, and someday it will hit end of life, but it's not there yet. IDWorks has live connections to databases, can be native connections, can be ODBC, read from many, write to one, and it uses the Windows print drivers to encode mag stripes. So it doesn't do very well unless somebody has gotten the SDK to support reading and writing to contactless smart cards. But if you do, it almost certainly requires that you have a data card or Entrust data card printer. For those schools, especially that are trying to do something with HID cards, read them in the printer, or especially if you want to encode an HID card beyond procs, especially iClass, iClass SC, CIAS, it certainly makes your life a lot easier, if not even just possible, to use AssureID. AssureID is also not a new product. It's been out over 10 years. It does have a newer look. It was designed with the ribbons, Windows ribbon look in 2009. So it does look much more modern, and it works. And HID has really kept up the encoding and reading support for HID printers and readers. But again, as far as the software itself, it has not changed much, if at all. Card Exchange is an independent product. We've talked about that, and some of you schools may be familiar with that. It is very powerful. It's quite inexpensive. It has very good card encoding features for procs, MyFair, DesFire. Does not encode HID, secure identity object. So it's not HID SC, so that'd be CIAS and iClass SC. So it doesn't encode those. It can read, under certain circumstances, it can read data from those cards, but won't be encoding them. But if you're trying to do anything with MyFair, and especially DesFire, this is great software for that. It has a network version where it's kind of a hybrid, where it's a desktop software, but through the print server software that they offer, your printers can be connected to a PC and sit on the network, even if you're not using that PC to print. So it has some nice hybrid features, and the Cloud Suite is now available. Producer 12, which will be web-based, was due this fall, and we'll see where that ends up because everything is different now. And sure enough, somebody on our call said they're using, I think, Secure Software House to print their cards, because a number of schools do use their physical access control system to print their cards. And it works well in that the access control system knows about that card. It may or may not support capturing the card number, the pre-programmed card number. very well, but it certainly, if you're printing the card there, you know that card holder is in that system, and that's a big deal. It'll open your doors, especially if your security or your police department is in charge of your card system. Then it's not unlikely they're going to use their packs to make the cards. The couple problems that I'm sure run into is that they are really hard to get data in and out of. Access control system databases are designed to be secure, and they're not designed to communicate with other systems very well. Not that it can't happen, and some of the newer systems are better at it. They also don't have a lot of great printer support in terms of encoding or reading. They may support a certain printer and a certain encoder, and they'll do a bunch of work, usually for a particular customer, large university, big hospital complex, large corporation. They'll get a certain printer and encoder up and running, and now it can read or encode contactless cards. And then they did that. And then 3 years later, that reader or printer is discontinued or something changed, and they're not real quick necessarily at updating that. So having brought up encoding chips, let's go to this poll.
Thanks, David. All righty. Launching now. Okay, everybody should be able to see this. What does your printer do to your chips? So please select one, and we'll go over the results. Perfect. All righty, I'm going to share. Okay, so 50% of you say encodes our own data for our access control and our point of sale system. 36% reads pre-programmed numbers such as ATD Corporate 1000. 14%, we hope to encode our cards someday. Awesome. Thanks, guys, for that quick response time there. Very helpful.
All righty. Again, a very involved group here. Half of you are encoding your own data, so pretty adventurous. Not too many years ago, that wasn't really an option. So some of the one card systems have come through with that. Transact has developed a good system that works within their world for encoding data, and certainly makes that possible. I think it was important as I was going through chip reading and encoding, and for those of you that decide to download the slide deck here for reference later, this is useful as of today. The only thing really surprising here, as far as what kind of chips each of these softwares, and you have to have the right reader and you have to have the right printer, and for the type of card you're trying to work with the software, they all have to line up. The only thing that really stands out here is in TrueCredential, our current testing of the most recent testing, which is pretty recent, is that it does not support AES DeskFire encoding. It will encode and encrypt data to a DeskFire chip, but not with AES. And AES is the feature that you're paying extra for. That's the Advanced Encryption Standard, AES 128, that is considered sort of state of the art for everyday encrypting of symmetrical data, symmetrical encryption of data. So the fact that TrueCredential is not supporting that right now is a bit of a downer. It's also kind of tricky. So anyway, just if you are looking at TrueCredential and you're going to have DeskFire EV1 cards or EV2 cards, check to find out about that AES encoding if you are thinking of going in that direction. Moving along. So let's talk about cloud-based ID software. And it is a paradigm shift because it gets off of the desktop and into the cloud. And there are two different ways that we talk about this stuff. One is the true cloud, where the software is actually designed to sit in a cloud service, which would be AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure, because they provide tools and processes unique to each of those services that makes your cloud product and service enhanced. There are things you can do there that you can't do just by stuffing it in a plain old vanilla server that doesn't do much for you. So if something's true cloud, it it should be enhanced in its capabilities and offerings, and it will be hosted and managed by the application maker. So when they do an upgrade, they do it on the cloud. You don't have to worry about upgrades, they just happen, or updates. Browser-based software is a much broader term, because now it just means you can get to that software through a browser. So it could be in the cloud or it could be on premise. It requires a web service. If you're installing it on-prem, it's going to have a web server to get it into the web browser, and it's often called web software. The nice thing about both is there's no client software. There's nothing you have to download to your local machine. The advantages are there's nothing on your local machine. IT doesn't have as much to support. You don't have to worry about Windows updates. You can print to a different printer than the one that maybe or not plugged into your local PC. However, it's harder to support hardware over a network connection than it is over a local USB or Ethernet connection from a PC directly to hardware. And a really good example of that is you download software for this conference, GoToWebinar, that enables you to use the microphone and the camera and the speaker on your computer or on your headset. And I had this experience just today setting this up. I have a Bluetooth headset. I was trying to connect it to my laptop. For some reason, it wasn't connecting. But when I opened GoToWebinar's client connected to my headset, great. So my Windows machine doesn't know how to connect to the headset I'm wearing today, but GoToWebinar client does. So that's an example of how hardware needs to be supported on a local machine unless there's something over the network that's really unique and able to do that. So it's just challenging. Going to a full network introduces challenges. So just to step back here, big picture for a moment, the bank teller model is the way a lot of card offices look, and they look great. You walk in and there are all those windows, and you go up, you take your photo, they print a card, it's one-to-one. It works great. But this concept in retail, Apple was not, of course, the first to introduce it, but they made it popular, and we're used to seeing this now. And so the idea here is you walk in and you don't have to go up to a window and one person. Somebody can walk up to you with a tablet or mobile device, and you can have an interaction, and you can initiate your card production process. A number of things make that possible, because now maybe you don't have the camera bolted to the counter, you don't have the printer plugged directly into the PC right there that you do your input from. So things that help, self-service photo upload. There are a bunch of these out there. Fargo Connect, True Credential support mobile photo capture, but not self-service. So, Fargo Connect is supported by, say, Seaboard, for example. So you have Seaboard on your tablet, you walk around, you take photos. Fargo Connect can print cards with that photo. True Credential does it within their software. Many universities have built their own photo upload. Seaboard has their own product, to capture photos remotely. So self-service, Cloud Card and My Photo are the two third-party products most familiar that'll do this, and you can contract with either one of those regardless of your card system. Now, some people mentioned that they have Fargo Connect, so this is very familiar to you. Fargo Connect is a cloud-based support for your printing system. The HID Cloud Portal is connected to a console, which shows in this diagram on the bottom left, and it supports several printers. But the Cloud Portal also is connected to an identity partner portal, which is your one card system perhaps, or your access control system. And it also gives the option to send print jobs to a third-party system if you don't want to print your cards or can't get into the office to print your cards. So Fargo Connect, here's the console. It's a network device. It puts that hardware support right next to your printer, connected to the network with the intelligence to handle the network connection and send a print job to your printer. It also has print release or follow me printing if you want, to take the multifunction device metaphor. But anyway, you can present a card, you can type in a PIN, to pull those print jobs, you can see what's going on with the printer from this console. It's essentially a tablet, but it functions as an intelligent endpoint for your printers. Fargo Connect portal has two nice features that save whoever integrates and builds a front end for this having to build a card designer. So the card designer there is on the right, and it works like card designers work. Drag and drop, throw in a text box, throw in graphics, two sides, barcode fonts, mag encoding, whatever you need. And then on the left is a dashboard of all the printers on your network, and you can see them in the Fargo Connect portal, and it tells you what's going on. So if you have a printer across town at a smaller campus, you can see what's going on with that printer. And you send a job over there, you can see that it printed, you can see that it did not print, you can get an error message, whatever. So it does give you, through that HID portal, information about what's going on with your printers. Moving on to, but before I leave that, the thing about Fargo Connect is it has to have something else as its interface. It does not have an interface. It's designed to be integrated into a one card system. So right now, Seaboard, Atrium, some of the other one card systems are working on it. Secure offers interfaces for Fargo Connect. So if you have one of those systems, you will go to that system and initiate your print job. Look up your person, do whatever needs to be done to their record. When you hit print, that job is sent through Fargo Connect using all the Fargo Connect technology in the background to the console, which then prints the card. Well, I don't know if this last, but anyway, Entrust Data Card True Credential. There are a lot of questions about this, and I noticed nobody's really using True Credential on this call. We hear reports that some people love it, some people are struggling with it. Because it's on the network, it's a little bit more difficult to install. You need a little bit more support in getting it installed, and you have a web server that serves the data through web browsers on any machine, so that's cool. There's an API for integration, and so Seaboard, Transact, other one card system providers have done integration of Entrust Data Card True Credential, and they are offering it as a new version of IDWorks. So it has a unique interface, what they call workflows. So it looks very different, but it gives you some powerful ways to approach building your card production system. So it gives you a lot there. Because everything's on a network, DataCard has gone the next step and taken a very bold step, actually, in supporting the printers directly over the network without any intermediate hardware. And this is a big deal, and evidently it works sometimes, but we've also heard reports that at times, depending on the network reliability or management of the network, can have some difficulty. So there's no hardware, network hardware, near the printer to support each printer. The print job comes directly from the server where the True Credential software sits, goes directly to the printer without anything in the middle there. So when it works, it's great, but it's something that evidently there have been some challenges with that. It also gives you the ability to deal with, through True Credential, all your printers wherever they are over the network. So, check on them, see what needs to be done, all supported through True Credential. So that the vision here is bold. I think it's still being worked out, and it's still subject to some of the vagaries of networks, which, working from home, we all know are not as brilliant and reliable as when we used to just use them occasionally, like to buy online. So there's stuff there. It took True Credential got off to a bit of a rough start, but now it's much more solid, and Transact has offered integration with encoding in True Credential, which is pretty cool. So the product differences, yes, very specifically here between True Credential and Fargo Connect. So they're both can be integrated. True Credential can also stand alone. Fargo cannot. True Credential will want data card printers. Fargo Connect has to have Fargo printers. And then the business model. True Credential you can buy from anybody that sells ID software. If you're buying the fully integrated version, you'll buy it from the integrator because they did the work. Fargo Connect, however, even when it's integrated, is still available from HID partners. So a little different business model there. And that just important. You'll find that out if you're looking at Fargo Connect. You'll learn quickly how that works. So just checking, because I had mentioned I think we're going to find out nobody has True Credential, but just why don't you, if you've even heard stories, go ahead and respond to this poll.
I think we'll know what the answer is, but it'll be interesting. We'll see. All right, here we go. 67. Network features are challenging. 33%. We had some trouble. So that's with the assumption that no one on here utilizes it. This is just from word of mouth from friends and other folks that they work with. So there you go, Dave.
Okay, great. That's great, Mark. And let's just roll right into the ending here. And I appreciate you all hanging with us for so long. And we will be around for questions, but just one more event, Mark.
Yeah, guys. So if everyone could utilize either their phone, tablet, PC to go to menti.com, menti.com. It'll prompt you for the code. It's a 6-digit code. It's at the top of the screen. It's 106486. Once you go there, just throw in the word that best fits this question. What would you like to change about your card issuance and credential management process? Once we start seeing some results getting submitted, they'll fly up on the screen, and we'll just kind of call it out. So yeah, mobile credential. Want to incorporate that on campus. And just to remind you folks, we will have a mobile credential presentation. So if you're not signed up, I can go over the details of that. Integrated systems, true web. So I'm assuming that would probably mean like cloud-based, 100% cloud. My screen is so small. I apologize. Let me expand it here. Okay. Inline encoding. That is always a very good one to have on campus. Makes life a lot easier instead of having to do the tap and go system. Photo upload. Campus buy-in. Everyone works in those siloed departments. So yeah, getting in buy-in from everybody on the university is very challenging at times. Remote submission. Streamline. Photo upload again. So the bigger the text, the more times folks are submitting that. So yeah, photo upload. And Dave, there's a number of products out there, right, for photo upload. I mean, the one that we work with the most is CloudCard, but there's some other guys out there that have some solid products, I believe.
Yep, absolutely.
CIOS reading. Okay, that sounds like a candidate probably for Fargo Connect. If you're talking about the management system there. So yeah, very cool, very good. Get rid of IDWorks. That thing just will not die, will it? I tell you. Solid software. It just will not break, and it just. I'm sure folks have issues with it, but how many times have we, walked up to a PC and kicked off the dongle from your USB port and broken not only the dongle but the USB input on your PC. So lots of troubles there. So okay, cool. We'll roll right into the Q&A portion. I've got a number of folks that had some questions submitted, so thank you for everybody on that. Dave, I'm just going to throw them to you and see if you can hit them out of the park here. Regarding visitor management software, are there products available that will auto-vet, check visitor backgrounds a service available for known criminals?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, that's a fairly standard feature for any enterprise level visitor software. And there are visitor manager software, and there are a number of different products available from desktop to cloud-based, but they connect to these services. You pay a fee for the services. They're not, I don't think they're terribly expensive, but they check those databases and then tell you who's coming on your campus.
Perfect. Let's see here. How does Fargo Connect determine pricing? Is it by active users or school size? And I put a little asterisk on this one, Dave. Could you also throw in the pricing on Card Exchange Cloud Suite as well, since they're both cloud-based solutions?
Right. So the Card Exchange web service is based on active IDs. So if you have 30,000 people in your school, but you're only using that for new enrollees, so maybe you're adding 4,000 or 5,000 a year, that's all you're paying for with Card Exchange. Fargo Connect has a couple of different pricing models. The one that we're most familiar with is based on full-time enrollment. And we went around that a number of times with HID, and that just seems to be what schools are used to. A lot is based on full-time enrollment. So pricing, and that way it takes away the whole like, gee, did we use all our credentials? Do we have a few more? Can we get some money back at the end of the year? All that just kind of goes away. It's a reasonable price per year based on the size of the school.
Cool. And I think, don't we use some sort of independent .org website to determine those how large the undergrad population is and everything?
Yeah, we'll take the school's word for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There you go.
Every once in a while we ask every once in a while in a conversation, we'll say, how many students do you have? Oh, 500. Like, okay.
Got it. Okay, so regarding Fargo Connect again, can I connect my in-house ID software to it? Is there an SDK available?
Yeah, you can. And we've had institutions ask about that.
Okay, cool. So if it doesn't match up with, say, if you're not using Seaboard or Atrium or something like that, and you've kind of done your own thing, don't worry. I mean, you have the ability to still connect to Fargo Connect if you have something in-house. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the integrators are doing it, so you would think the IT people at a school could do it.
Awesome. Okay. And last question, it's kind of a double question. Again, it's with Fargo Connect. So say, for instance, to release a print job within Fargo Connect on a satellite campus that was created at the main campus, can you flash a card on the satellite console to release the job instead of a PIN number on the console?
Yeah, in this photo right here, I think you're all seeing that.
Yes.
That little bump on the top of the device is a card reader. So you can present a card to that, a contactless card, and that will release the print job. Or log you into the console. Is there any?
Yeah. Is there what type of contactless cards are available for that reader? Is it just high frequency, or is it can you do prox as well? That's just my question.
Yeah, you can guess it's an HID card of some sort. Now, does it read? I don't know. I haven't had to answer that question. We can find out. So
I stumped them, guys. I did it.
Yeah, you did it. Good job.
What do I win? Oh boy. Anyway, okay. Well, that was the last question. So I think we're all set there. Great questions, everyone. Thank you for participating today. Don't miss out on our next webinar. That one is this Tuesday, May 5th at 1 p.m. And that is the one actually on going mobile for under $100 million. So, or $1 million or whatever giant number you want to come up with. Remember that each webinar does require its own registration. So please, if you haven't done so already, jump to Color ID's website, top right-hand corner. You'll see webinars. This is the Campus Forum series, so you can register there. And with that, on behalf of Danny, David, and myself, Be safe out there. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Goodbye.